Okay, today is March 29th and it's 6:30 Mountain Time, and I'm really excited to have all of you here. This is our client and assistant call. So we get to join once a month, and this is really fun when we get to do this. Kalli Wilson is going to be joining us for a moment, but I wanted to first introduce what we're going to do and how this will work. So I mentioned to those of you that were on for a few minutes ago that explode the chat with questions. Since we're talking about kind of your relationship together, I want to make sure that you feel like you can ask questions anonymously. And so message me privately if you have a question that you want me to address, and I won't say who asked the question. Additionally, feel free to kind of interrupt us and ask other questions too as ideas come. We want to really, the goal of this conversation is to help you all really find a cohesive relationship and work well together, right? That this is there, sometimes it's very new working with an assistant. You've been trained so long to support a team, and then it's kind of a whole other experience to now manage someone. And so I wanted to help bridge that gap and help that to be a really cohesive relationship. I know that Kalli is still jumping on, and Jamie, feel free to just let me know when you see her jumping on. Even though she's not here just yet, she had her daughter got burned, so she's fixing that really quick. But I want to introduce her a little bit so that you know some things about Kalli and why I think she's so awesome. So Kalli's a presidential diamond, and she's been speaking at the global level for several years now, not only with doTERRA but also empowering women, and she does a lot with um, she's a life, health, and business coach, and so she's the founder of the relaunch programs for parenting and life and business and so many other things. And so she does a lot, and she's actually had a VA team for about 8 or 9 years now. And for those that don't know, I used to be Kalli's assistant, and now I do this. And so she's going to be speaking with us a little bit today too. And I just want you to know that Kalli is one of the most heart-centered, soul-synced people that I know. And so we're really blessed to have her on the call today and sharing some of her wisdom and experience, where I think she can relate on a personal level with you on what it's like to work with an assistant and how to optimize that relationship so it's effective. So Kalli, are you with us yet? I don't think she is. Okay, I'm just going to kind of keep going for just a minute before she jumps on, and then we'll ask her some questions. But to set the stage, I know that in doTERRA we're taught how to develop leaders. We're taught how to do sales and invest in your business, and those are all things that if you're here already, you are probably excellent at. And now there's another role of stepping into the space of a CEO, where it's managing a team. And if you are experienced in that, that's great. Or if you're new at this, and there's still things to learn, whether you're a newbie or have been doing this for a while. And so we want to bridge that gap so that you all can have a really effective relationship going forward. And for those that don't know, I had a weird dream of being a mediator, a conflict manager. And that kind of set me on this path of taking a lot of courses for conflict management, even getting certified and doing a whole bunch of other things. So I have this background knowledge that's what I'm kind of weaving into our conversation today, in addition to having assistance of my own, being an assistant previously. So I'm kind of trying to infuse this conversation with all of those things. So let's see, Kalli's still not with us. So really quick, I want to talk a little bit about what a VA is and what a VA is not. So first of all, a VA is not a business consultant, right? I've had several people who say, I just want my assistant to tell me what to do. And while yes, they can definitely push you and say, hey, I remember you said you wanted to do this, or you have this on your calendar, don't forget to do this. It's not likely that they are going to come in and say, all right, let's make over your business. Here's what we're going to do. You're going to do this and I'm going to do this. That's not really their role. Ultimately, you still get to be the one that decides how to best utilize your VA. And I saw that Kalli just barely joined us. I gave you an awesome introduction, Kalli, but I know that you didn't get to hear it. Can you hear us okay, Kalli? Okay, good, awesome. So Kalli is here, and I want to ask her a few questions about her experience working with a virtual assistant. And now she has a team of several people, not just one. So Kalli, can you tell us a little bit about your journey when you very first started working with a VA? What were some of the things that you knew you needed help with, and how did you know that you were ready to hire help?
I think I hired help before I knew what to do with an assistant, before I thought I was even ready. Because I think hiring out is a little intimidating, right? Because if those are for those of you who are running businesses, or I'm in doTERRA, I always tell Megan, it's like wrestling an octopus. There's so many different pieces to it. And so it was actually Lee Shedovy who told me, as soon as you hit Diamond, Kalli, you're hiring an assistant. And I'm like, I'm fine. Like, I got it. But really, if you want to grow bigger, if you want to expand your business, you really, really need to start getting more smart with how you utilize your time. And so there are things that I needed to start delegating quickly because it was just taking up too much time. So I think Megan, we ran into each other at doTERRA Will Call, I think it was. And I'd known she was an assistant prior. And so we just started talking, and I don't know, kind of just worked out. And I think initially you were mostly helping me with packages and shipping things and collecting samples to ship out, I think is what you were doing.
Yeah. And newsletters. I remember that was a
Newsletters.
next thing we were doing too. In the beginning, were we doing all of the things like that were possible? Were we creating massive programs and creating all of these big things, or were we starting kind of small?
I think the biggest thing is, as I was thinking about this call, I think what you need to do is first prioritize your business. I'm assuming that most of you, am I wrong to assume that most of them are in doTERRA? Some of them are maybe out. Okay,
I
so
think 99% are in doTERRA.
perfect. Even if you're not, I mean, you have to really look at your business in terms of three folds. There's a threefold mission of my business. The first one is recruiting, right? Getting new customers, new business builders into our business. The second fold is supporting. How do we support the people on our existing team? And then the last one is reactivating. And so to me, I would never say, yeah, just jump in and tackle all of it. We never did that, Megan. We worked on one project at a time. Partly because you're learning how to, one, work with an assistant. You're also having to dissect what you do and teach someone else to do that. And so we just kind of initially started with supporting. And I said, okay, I need to support these people, send out these incentives, send out these promos. And then why don't we just start with a basic newsletter? So I would say start small, one project at a time, see that to completion, and then bring on another project.
And that's such great advice, because I know that especially when you first get help, it can be the natural default. Like, I finally have help. I want to do all of these things. And so I think it really is good to prioritize. And we have a few people that are younger than Diamond. And so my advice would be to you as well, make sure that you're not spending so much time in creation of all the things like a logo and a website, that you're forgetting those core things that grow your business, because otherwise you're going to go dry. So make sure that you're still, when you're younger in doTERRA, that you're still spending time with the recruiting and the teaching and the enrolling. Otherwise, an assistant really isn't, you're not going to see the fruits of that labor as soon as you want it to. So a few other things. We were starting to talk about, Kalli, some of the things that a VA is and a VA is not. And so a VA is obviously generally really organized, techie. There's, as you know, in doTERRA, there's so many different programs and things to learn. And it's helpful if you can say, can you go figure out Project Broadcast for me and tell me if it's something that we can use? They get stuff done. And they can hold you accountable to things that you have said you want to do, but they, again, are not a business consultant where they're not going to walk in and say, I'm going to make over your business and here's the plan. You're going to do this and I'm going to do this. That's actually your role as the manager, where you get to say, this is the master plan and here's how I want you to operate in it. But at the same time, one of the things I loved with you, Kalli, is that I felt like it was very collaborative, where all the time you were asking me, you were saying, here's where I want to go. Where do you want to play? And it made me really think about that. I'm like, well, I don't know. I'm here to support you. But it really did make me think like, oh, well, I actually have always wanted to learn more about this, or I would love to do more here. And it really made that what I did passionate. I felt very passionate about what I did because you were asking me that often. And so I really appreciated that. Some things that a VA is not. Or Kalli, do you have anything to add to that before I move on?
Well, it really helps. I mean, when you are the CEO of your business and you're bringing on help, like you are the visionary. You are the one that's directing. You're the one that's taking not just your doTERRA team, but your support team right to the next level. And so I think it was easy because when I had Megan working for me, and we had a couple others as well, we were always focusing on How do I want our team to show up at leadership, and how do we want them to show up at convention? We really just had those two as our focuses, and that way we stayed in creation mode. It's like, okay, if we want this many new silvers, Megan, what do you think we should do to do that? What would be really fun, right? And so, yeah, I did use my assistants a lot to collaborate and get ideas.
Totally. So kind of moving into that space of what a VA is not. So we've kind of talked about that they're not a business coach, and you can hire, actually, in fact, if you want to hire a business coach, I know Kalli does that and she takes on specific clients for what she does, but a VA is not that. A VA is not a business coach. They are also, this might be a surprise to some of you, they are technically not an employee if they are a 1099 contractor. They are their own boss offering a service where you still work together collaboratively, but they are not technically an employee. And so I think that's something really helpful to sort of distinguish sometimes, is that you are a collaborative partnership together, and you're not just, does that make sense? Like, you're not just delegating tasks to someone like you would in the corporate world. This is a very collaborative experience. Something else that they are not is they are not on call. I hear a lot from the VAs. They're like, how do I structure my life so that I'm not always doing this, that I'm still present for my family when I want to be with my family, but I'm present for work when I want to be with work. And so that's something I hear a lot. So I want to sort of break that apart just for a second before we jump into a few other things. So one of the things that I think you can do together that I've seen some of my clients do is really helpful is decide together if there are specific hours that your VA wants to work. And so let's say they work every day from 10 to noon, and you know that that is when they're operating. And Kalli, we did that a few times. I appreciate it sometimes when you put on your calendar, this is when Mikkel is working, this is when Megan is working. So you kind of knew when to send stuff our way. Do you have any thoughts on that? And if that was helpful to you?
I think one of the biggest things you have to do, and maybe you're going to cover this in a second, is to be legitimate. You need to have a weekly board meeting with your VA and all the people that work with you. That has to be written into the calendar, non-negotiable. And so I would say we would do it very casually, but I think the more I got organized and really treated my business like a business, every Monday morning at 10 a.m., that's when I meet with my girls. And we do Trello boards. We do have something, and we might go over that a little bit later, and I can even show you a peek of mine. But that way we would basically brain dump all the possible things that we needed to work on, and then we would choose collectively what is realistic for us to do this week. And I'm really, really specific about not giving my VAs too much work, like 1 or 2 projects max. I'm going to give to them. And then I kind of know more or less like when they plug in. I know one of my assistants, her biggest days when she has a sitter is Monday and Friday. So I know that she probably won't be very available during the middle of the week. So I load her up on Monday, and then I follow up on Friday. And so that's a huge thing. Today, even I just said, hey, when are you guys going to be taking vacations? Send me a link, a Google invite, so I can plug that in my calendar. Because as an employee, I mean, as an independent contractor, they can take breaks whenever they want. Like you can't control their lives. So it's really important for me ahead of time to just say, just tell me when you're going to be gone. That way we can schedule it in, and I do the same. And I think that works really, really, really well. You have to be flexible if they're independent contractors.
Yeah, and I really appreciated that instead of it sort of surprising you, like, oh no, I can't do this because they're going on vacation. It was sort of like we were preparing for it, where beforehand we're like, hey, I'm going to be out of town. That we could sort of plan on that. And I think that was one of the effective things of having a team too, is that eventually years down the road, Kalli hired additional people, and we'll talk about that too, where we could collaborate, and I could say, hey, I'm going to be out of town. Can someone else take this thing that I was doing while I'm gone? And so we could sort of pass things on to each other and really be a support team to one another. So helpful. What would you say to this, Kalli, that some about last minute project? Obviously last minute projects are going to happen, but how do you communicate that how effectively so that the assistant doesn't feel like everything that they're doing is last minute and urgent? Is there a way to remove that feeling?
I think first off, you have to get a little more disciplined yourself, and you have to realize, like, I'm asking them, but if it's a last minute thing that was outside of our board meeting, I'm going to make sure that if they can, I'm already going to assume that I'm going to do it myself, right? Because I've already set the standard for what my priorities are for the week. And then I just text them, hey, this just came up. Could you get it done within the next 24 hours? If you can't, let me know and I'll go ahead and take care of it. And for the most part, they pick it up and run with it, or they'll say, can't do it in 24, but I've got 48 hours. I can for sure get it out. So yeah, work with them, but always assume that if it's a last minute urgent thing, like you got to be in a position to take it on because they have lives too. Yeah. So hopefully that
Absolutely.
helps.
And especially, I feel like in doTERRA, we're so family oriented that we don't want to remove that from the VAs and feel like just because we're family oriented, they cannot be. And so we want to make sure that we're honoring the time for their personal lives with their families and being able to do the things that they want to do and not feel guilty for being at the park with their kids because now you have something that's come on the table. And so just communicate. I think that's really what it comes down to is just to ask, say, hey, I know this is last minute, but do you have time for this? And then create a dialogue is really important. On a similar note, um, what if an assistant got a draft for newsletter on Monday and the assistant said, I'm ready for you to review it so that we can publish it on your deadline on Friday. But the client didn't actually let them know until Thursday night that like, oh, hey, I actually just barely saw it. Now I have all these changes. Is it realistic for the assistant to be like, well, I guess I'm dropping everything, all my Thursday night plans to do that? Or how do they handle that situation?
Again, you need to work with them and assume that if you're dropping something on and you're not giving them enough time, you better be ready to own it if they can't. Right. But Megan, I think working with you, you would just tell me like, I could totally do it. Or, I've got 1 hour to knock it out. Whatever I don't knock out, I'll pass back to you, Kalli, and you can finish it. So I think we worked in tandem really, really well. The other thing that could help too for a lot of people is to actually schedule days. So to get yourself out of urgency, right? And I find that even our doTERRA people, they come to me like it's urgent, like I have to take care of placements right away. And I've got to make sure, like, they act like everything is urgent. And I've noticed that sometimes if I don't answer them back in 4 hours, they'll like send me another text and say, oh, what? No, never mind, I figured it out. So I think it's really important to get more proactive and honestly schedule days in the month when you do things. So my assistants know on the 15th of the month is when I ship stuff out. I just plug that into the 15th. So I say, anything I need to ship out, guys, will you just put it on my shipping tracker and my Trello board by the 14th? So they go in and get samples or promos or instant, like any of that. And they just, like, we start scheduling things, right? On the first of the month, we know rank advancements are going to post. I know who's going to do it, when they're going to do it. So when just notice the patterns. I even just had a conversation with my assistant saying, hey, we get placements requests all the time and everyone's like urgent, but when does placements really meet? They only meet twice a month. So, so instead of like checking it every day for people, I say, no worries. We check it every Monday for 10 minutes. So anything that's in there, we'll go ahead and get those approved and move on before the 15th and the end of the month. So the more you can just schedule things and get your assistant on a schedule, the more you're going to be productive. And then the last minute things, you're going to build that like soft landing place just in case, because there are other, you'll know when their heavy days are and when their heavy days aren't.
And I'd also add to that too, that even scheduling drafts when before not just the deadline of a project, but when the draft is due. So you give yourself some lead time to review and make those changes so that it's not last minute when you're making all those final changes before it is published. And I'll say too, for you assistants, feel free to even say to give those deadlines yourself. If a deadline is not given, even for a draft, just say I've given you the newsletter draft. Today it's Monday. If I don't get it by Thursday at this time, I won't be able to make any changes. So can you please let me know before then if you want me to make any changes? Otherwise, I'll let you go ahead and make them. That's a really good, healthy communication on the assistant side as well. So you're giving your client even a deadline to operate under, and you can even send those reminders of, hey, I just reminder I sent you that newsletter. Did you get a chance to look at it? How many times, Kalli, did I ever say stuff like that? And did it drive you crazy or was it helpful?
I think it was okay because we just had those expectations, and I did learn everything that Megan was doing. I really did. So if she couldn't do it, I could jump in and adjust the newsletter, so together we would learn projects together just in case, because again, this is my business. And if I lost Megan, which I did, she started her own business, right? I needed to be able to quickly train someone else. So I'm still like, we're going to be implementing Project Broadcast a little more aggressively this week. I'm like, make sure that I want to be on that call so I can be in it just in case I have to last minute change something because you're, with your family. So I do think that that's kind of important. Maybe some of you don't want to hear that, but I do think it kind of is.
Yeah. What if somebody, the clients, I get a lot of clients who are just not techie at all, and they're really overwhelmed by knowing those systems and how they work. How would they collaboratively work together? Let's say they can't finish the newsletter in Flowdesk or whatever system they're using, or can't send out that project broadcast. How is there a way to kind of balance that when the client is just not techie at all, and that's really all that the assistant does? Is there, how do we work that out?
Well, I think you have a really great thing going, Megan, because maybe you have backups that could fill in if needed, right? There's some things that I don't want my assistants to learn, like video editing or like stuff like that. So I would like last minute jobs, hire someone on Upworks or Fiverr a lot. Because I was like, this is a waste of my assistant's time. This is like a one shot wonder kind of thing. So I would do that as well. And I remember sometimes you would just do a Zoom for me. You'd be like, let me just do a Zoom recording so you know what you need to do to get this out. So, I mean, for the most part, we didn't have a lot of those emergencies. And if you prepare on that Monday call, like you can avoid so much of that. So I would say it was kind of minor, but I think those could be some safety nets.
Yeah. How about BOGOs? Since that's usually, we can sort of plan the month that it's going to happen, but not always the exact week. I've been getting several messages in the chat of people saying, how do we create boundaries or manage that? And so it's not always feeling so rushed or urgent. Are there times when there just are occasional things that are rushed and urgent, or how do you prepare for something like that before it comes?
Well, we like to use OneDrop because everything is populated. All the copy you need for social media is all populated. And so this week, right, we had other plans that we were going to execute. BOGOs popped up. I basically just told my assistant, okay, we're going to put all our other projects on pause this week. They're staying on the Trello board, and I'm happy to show them my Trello board. All the other projects are staying on, but we're pausing and we're doing BOGOs. So one of my assistants just basically took copy from OneDrop and just copied and pasted, to make sure our team knew what they were doing. And then the other one started working on the project broadcast. So sometimes stuff just comes up. It's just, you're working with corporate that is sometimes spontaneous. So that's the octopus, right? Okay, this is the leg we're going to have to wrestle, and everything else goes on hold. But BOGOs, it's happened enough times that you can, even before, sit down with your assistant and just say, what are our BOGO protocols? And we know they're probably going to happen twice a year. So let's just get our protocols in place so that when it happens, we're good to go. And that's something that you should do. Honestly, just wise business advice is everything that you do, as nerdy as it sounds, you should be having protocols. Because if in the event that something happens to your assistant or something happens to you, great business builders, great business owners are organized enough so someone could step in just in case. And so even Megan, I mean, there was a point in time when she was on my trust because I thought if something happens to me, Megan knows everything about my business. She could step in and run it for my husband and my kids for a season, right? And so I started writing out like, this is how you do buy-ins at the end of the month. Here's the login passwords. These are the areas. Da, da, da. This is how you log into my Facebook page. And so the more nerdy you can get, and this is why I say work on one project at a time, because if you're trying to manage 50 octopus legs, like you're not going to execute really, really well, and you're going to feel scattered, and your assistants are not going to like working for you.
And they call that SOPs, standard operating procedures. So a really great habit to be in is even just creating a free Loom video. You can create 5-minute videos for free on Loom of just recording your screen, going through a certain process so that you save those videos in like a folder somewhere, like Hallie's talking about. So whether it's your husband or your VA or somebody can jump in and automatically see how to do that next thing. is really helpful. Um, okay, I'm getting a lot of questions, but I want to make sure that we get to everything else too. So a couple of things really quickly along the lines of what an assistant is not. They're not all essential oil experts, even though they've gone through my training, and we do talk a little bit about what what essential oils are and the mission of doTERRA, and kind of getting that baseline foundation. They're not going to walk out knowing all the ratios of dilution and that kind of stuff. They're not going to know off the top of their head all the time what oils to use for every single thing, but they can go and find that information. So doTERRA.com has a plethora of information. So even if they don't know all the things about essential oils, it's as long as they can be a good researcher, that's not necessarily required. Would you agree, Kalli?
Right. Yeah, I think our latest one didn't really know much about oils. And for Christmas, I actually bought her a bunch with LRP points because I was like, I need to help you expand this. And she loved it. But I think that's the biggest thing is don't assume people can read your mind, and don't be, well, you need to pre-teach people, right? Until they are confident. I think that's a big thing, is making sure that you dumb everything down and you tell them exactly, and don't fire them if you didn't do your job by pre-teaching. Does that make sense when I say pre-teach?
Mm-hmm.
Pre-teach tasks.
Yep, totally. And even with, back to the essential oil thing, if they're, I love that the person you're talking about who does, she's actually creating content for you and doesn't even know the oils very well. She's creating images and scripts and things. And so she just knows where to go find stuff. And so as an assistant, go explore where you can find things. If they say, I want to put some images out or social media posts about sleep and essential oils, if you yourself don't know, go investigate and find that information, because it's out there. It's like there's so much there that you have access to. A few other things that they are not, even though they wear a lot of hats, that virtual assistants, they can do a lot for you. Generally, they are not lead generators. Unless you've hired them and they know going in that's specifically their role. They are not sales closers, because that's what you do, of course. And they are not usually high level social media managers or strategists. There are specific people you can hire for that niche completely. Everything from hashtag research to creating your social media plan in like a month in advance and following people in your like audience. Like there's a whole strategy to that that's different than just scheduling things out in your Facebook group, and is different than just occasionally one drop images on your Instagram account. So if you're looking for something next level, ask your assistant if that's something they want to play in and they want to learn, and be okay with them learning along the way, or hire someone specifically for that role. Same with graphic design. I've had several people that say, I just want you to teach my assistant to be a graphic designer. And that's not something I can teach. That is not something most people can teach, because people have an eye for design or they don't. And that's something that you usually have some sort of education or background or experience in to do that thing. And so, Kalli, why have you found it helpful to have people on your team that operate in different roles or functions?
Well, one is they get stuff done a lot faster when they're just doing their thing. And so I have a primary assistant now that is the team liaison. She worked for doTERRA, so she actually does strategy sessions for me. I can pay her to do wellness consults for me. Like, so she came really trained, and she had her own business. And so, sometimes I say, I can't be at the continuing ed. Can you go ahead and teach that for me? But communication is one of her top 5 skills. And she loves to do stuff like that. In fact, she also loves writing, but design doesn't come as quickly for her. And she knows it. She's like, oh, I don't design, but I'm happy to write copy. So I hired another girl named Mikkel, who doesn't work as many hours. She's a homeschooling mom. She just works a few hours a week, really minimal, but she's able to produce content and copy really fast, because she does that. Like she's got a great eye, and she can make flyers and things even faster than I can and make it look better. And so the more you can just make sure the right people are sitting on the bus, it actually, if I did it myself, I probably would take 2 hours to do what she produces in half an hour, and Emily too. And Emily will say that, like, Mikkel just works faster because she's in her zone of genius. And so sometimes you might want to have someone on hand to take over, because again, in the long run, if everyone's doing what they're super good at, what they love, it's going to take faster and it's going to save you more money.
Yeah, and same with I was going to mention too. So those of you that heard that Kalli's VA does her teaching her classes, know that she used to work at doTERRA. Like, I don't want you to place that expectation on your VAs here in the room right now. That obviously, if they come with different skill sets, that's something that you can talk with them about. But I don't want to put that pressure on all the VAs. Like, whoa, I didn't.
No, 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 but I mean, I hired her specifically because I knew she had that skill set, right? And I even do want to hire someone that can do kind of what Megan was doing, call and help reactivate um, accounts and teach classes. Or if I'm like, I can't teach, like you can get creative, but you need to find someone that wants to do that, that loves to do that, that's like, sure, like that's me, right? And so I think whenever I'm hiring, before I hire, I make a dream list of who I'm looking for. And I'm looking for a 10 in this area. Like, what are the roles that I want this person to be able to hold in my business? In fact, even on my Trello boards, we have different roles that are really, really clear. And anyway, and I just hired a business strategist who is way ahead of me and my assistants that's coming in to look at the whole thing. So I think, Megan, just helping people understand your assistant works for you. You are the visionary. You getting in the trenches, that's a partnership. And then for a business strategist, you gotta find someone that's ahead of you in that area.
I love that so much. Before we totally dive into, I have this whole section I want to go into about what to do if your VA doesn't have the skill set you need. But really quickly, I want to answer some messages in the chat. So one of them says, I always assume that I'm the last set of eyes on anything that's going out. Let's say like a newsletter, graphics. She says, is this exercising too much control or lacking delegation or respecting boundaries or a combo? What would you say to that, Kalli?
I would say yes until you get to be very confident and that your assistant can do that for you. Because I think in the beginning, like a lot of times they're representing your face, your voice, your stuff. Megan got to the point where I trusted her content. She would still let me look over it really quickly, but there are times when I'm like, I don't need to see it, just go. But I would say it took us a second to get into the rhythm, and with every assistant it kind of does. And then yeah, once you trust them, like let them go. Usually they're better than you are. Ultimately, like there were things that Megan was so far better at than I was. And so yeah, the more you can get people super competent, capable, and let them run, the more time you'll have to do the things that only you can do.
And that reminds me, was one of the very first tasks that we did was that newsletter. And I remember, and some of you have heard me tell the story, but for those that have not, we actually broke down my first newsletter draft for you for like an hour. We like broke it to pieces, and we like these different colors, different fonts, different content, make this smaller. And we broke it down for a while. And then the next month, instead of spending an hour on it, maybe 45 minutes, the next month, 30 minutes, next month, 15. We kind of became smaller and smaller until eventually you just said, I trust you, just send it out. And I think that's something that's really, really important when we talk about what your VA is not. They're not a mind reader. And it takes time to hear and understand your voice and to get to know you. Because even though you're all in doTERRA, Callie's voice is going to be different than Dawn's voice and different than Angie's voice. And it takes time to understand you and how you operate. So give that time. I promise that if you invest it in the beginning, it will pay off in dividends later.
And there were times, Megan, that I would send you to get trained on certain things. And like copy, like just writing powerful copy. I remember sending you to a copy course, and like we're all sending. There's three things I use before copy is sent out. I use Word. I usually write it on a Word doc. Then I put it into Grammarly, the premium version, and that copies it. And then if you really want to get your copy super tight, then you put it through a Hemingway. It's called Hemingway Editor, and that will help you really get all the words tight. But I remember it was like, everybody's going to learn how to write powerful copy, and you guys do not let newsletters go out until it runs through this, and this. And I think you can do that, right? Invest in them, invest in yourself. But I just wanted to put that little plug in.
And Marie Forleo's Copy Cure is the one that she sent us through, which was so good, by the way, that if you ever find value in that was really, really awesome. And kind of narrowing down your copy so that it's very focused. So now let's kind of get into what to do if your VA doesn't have the skill set or the time to support you as your team grows. So first of all, I would say that first, just ask the question. Like, just ask your assistant. Say, I'm ready for you to work for more hours, but I want to see what you're available for. we've been working 10 hours a week, but I'd love to have you working 15 or 20. Is that something you want to do and are capable of? And Kalli, that's something I loved that you used to do with me, is that you would just say, what is your bandwidth like this week? I know that last week you were only working 10 hours, but I have a new project. Do you want to play in here? Is this something you even have time for? And to be honest, there would be times when I was like, actually, I'm pregnant, I'm sick, and I'm tired, so I don't. Or other times it'd be like, I have all the energy in the world, hit me with it, I'm ready. And so we ebbed and flowed together, and it was really, really awesome. Okay, so that's one thing. What did you do, Kalli? Since obviously you and I were working together as just a one-on-one together for a while. When did you step? When did you know that it was time to step into hiring an additional person?
When roles got bigger, right? When my team got bigger and I needed different people to monitor different things rather than me. Yeah, some of you again are you're managing a smaller team. Some of you might be presidential diamonds where you need eyes on everything, right? So I think again, we communicated how many hours do you want to work, Megan? And when Megan started to feel a little pushed, I was like, let's bring on Megan some help. So we hired a girl that was amazing that helped Megan, and then we ended up bringing on someone else. And there were, I didn't keep all the assistants. Some of them came and went and got different jobs, or one of them was just working for too many people, and that got a little bit difficult, right? So I think you can ebb and flow, but I liked having Megan as kind of like my go-to girl. That then, as she got too busy, she actually managed the other assistants. Is kind of what happened, and that's kind of what's happening too in my business.
Chelsea asked, Kalli, where do you find all of your people? And in the beginning, actually, she when we knew we needed help, she would say, Megan, can you go create an application? And what we did was we started posting it actually on her team first. We'd send an email out and say, if you're interested in applying for this role, apply here. And we gathered people from the team and invited them to apply. And then I would go through all the applications and start doing some initial interviews. And it kind of like what I'm doing right now for a lot of you. And then I would bring the top cream of the crop to Kalli, and I'd say, here are my favorites. Who do you want to meet? And so Chelsea, that's kind of how we started to expand in the beginning, as we just started from the team, because a lot of people on your team are just users, just essential oil customers, but still want something more, but they don't want to build a doTERRA business. And so we did that a lot, didn't we, Kalli?
Yeah, and I kind of preferred that. I kind of preferred people that weren't trying to build a business and work for me, because I felt like their energy was too split. And so, and then sometimes, Chelsea, this is to you and I would like seriously just pray. Like, I just remember just writing my dream list. Like, this is who I would love to work with. And I found a couple of them that way. So I don't know. I think the clarity thing is huge, right? I've also, I mean, this is random too. I use Megan now to find my assistants. I've also used care.com, right? I have an assistant that comes to my home too to help. So anyway, but I'm running a big show, right? So I've got I've got multiple businesses and 5 kids. So I need a little more help.
Definitely. And I know that I've heard you, Kalli, say that eventually when you get to the point that you're big enough, that having an in-person like nanny slash, assistant in your house, and then a VA, and then someone that will even help clean. I've heard you kind of say before that those are your top 3 support people that you need. And I've known that sometimes when like the nanny wasn't there, it felt like other things were going crazy, because you needed that support at home so you could give time to the projects. So eventually, that's something to put on your vision board if you're not there yet, is that those are some key people you might want to manifest into your life. Let's see. I just want to make sure we get to some of these other questions really quickly. I'll answer that question about Nudge. Somebody said that, Kalli, I heard you mention you're talking about Project Broadcast, but I heard they're moving to Nudge. A lot of people are still staying on Project Broadcast and choosing not to move to Nudge, or they're starting on Project Broadcast knowing that they will eventually need to move to Nudge eventually. Good question. Some people are asking about specific tasks, and we'll get to that one too here in just a minute. Let's kind of keep going before we totally lose track of where we're headed. I want to make sure I'm not forgetting the chat too much. Okay, we kind of talked a little bit about investing in growth. So if you want your assistant to learn a new skill, instead of just saying, hey, I'd like you to learn a new skill, please ask them. Say, is this something you want to learn? If not, that's a good indicator it's time to hire a specific person for that. Let's say you want to start a blog and your assistant is writing is not their skill. It's time to now hire someone that does that. And I really want to help you kind of think about this analogy also for everybody that's on the call. Think of Target. If they just barely started opening their store and they hired one employee to run the cash register, to fill online orders, to manage the returns of items and stock the shelves, they would be really overwhelmed as an individual. And we want to make sure we're not doing that to your VAs at the same time, that they can do a lot for you, but let's check in with them and say, when is this too much? Do you need support? And I think that's just a really good, healthy conversation to ask a lot. That you're building a team. You're on your company, you are your own company. Okay, really quick question. Oh, last thing. I want to also help you see that turnover will happen. As much as I would love for all of you to be paired up with each other for the rest of your lives and to never have changes, it's healthy psychologically to acknowledge that it likely will. And I don't know if that will be in a year from now or in 8 years. Kalli and I have the pleasure to work together with for 8 to 9 years, but sometimes it's just a year. So think now, plan ahead for what you will do if and when that happens and how you will phase someone else into your business. Kalli, do you have any thoughts on that?
No, I think it's great. Yeah, I think that's great advice.
Okay, cool. So communication, I kind of want to step into that space just a minute. Um, Kalli, we have planners and we have visionaries that are some of my clients. How would you give advice to some of our visionaries who are very good at coming up with the master ideas and where they want to go, but not very good about coming down to the details and creating focus for what they actually want to have their assistant to do to get there? What would your be advice for that person?
Well, make sure you hire an assistant that's really nerdy, likes to do stuff like that. And I always tell people when I hire them, like, you like to do this, right? Like, and they're like, I love it. I'm like, seriously, you like to develop websites? I love it. That was Megan. Like the things that I hated that I was like, oh, it's going to suck my soul. I'm like, seriously, you like this? She's like, oh my gosh, give it to me, right? And so I think the pairing is important. The other thing that I think, if you're going to drive an assistant crazy, visionaries, if you are not willing to be at least a tiny bit disciplined. So can I tell them about micros, and would this be a good time?
Yeah.
So I'm going to give you some expensive business advice that I paid an expensive business coach for that really has revamped my life. So I'm a maximizer. Also, significance is in my top 5. So I'm like, big impact, big projects. How do we do everything in all things, right? And that could totally drive, I'm sure it did, Megan, bonkers multiple times. But I think having a project management software is so awesome. So Megan and I actually played around with several, and then we landed with Trello. She's like, actually, I think we're going to like Trello better. We bought some expensive stuff and all kinds of stuff, but Trello, it's very inexpensive. And I'll just show you. Should I just show you my Trello board?
Yeah. That's
ready?
awesome.
Okay. So you probably have seen Megan's Trello for like your business, where you're managing like your customers and all those things. You need to have, whenever someone works with you, in fact, you see my husband's on this too, because he works with us too. You need to have something like this. It's huge. So you'll see, like, I'll just kind of break this down. It could be overwhelming. Just stay with me, and Megan probably has a simpler version for you. But you'll see, like, the first thing we do as for me and my assistants is we have like this total project dump. If we could do anything that would help our whole team, like what would you do? And I just dump it there. And then I really just bring things into queue that I want to work on next. Generally, I like this list a lot smaller, but we just had a meeting, so it's bulked up a little bit. But these are things that are in queue that we're going to look at next. So we're not going to look at all things. We're going to look at these things and pull out the priorities. You also see I have me here, so I know, and my assistants know what I'm working on. And then I have Emily, Mikkel, and then my husband, John. we keep his list small. He's down with that. So I also think it's really important that you write out your roles. Write out your roles in your business. What is your role? My role as a presidential diamond, right, is to primarily be a steward of my team and recruit new people. I'm not having my assistant recruit new people for me. I also really stay in touch with my diamonds, and I'm really mentoring them on a quarterly basis, and then we meet monthly. So there's a couple things that I primarily do. I'm also the creative one, right? I'm the visionary and the creative one. So I'm directing the assistants. You'll see Emily, she's got some team names too. She's the team liaison. She's the rank strategist. She helps me develop programs and implement them for the team. That's her role. And she loves that, right? And that really fits well with her strengths. And then I've got Mikkel, who's my graphics girl. So she's my social media strategist, graphic designer. She does team recognition. She does social media customer support, and she supervises oil count. So we really have really clear roles. That way, if something comes up, I'm like, whose role is this again? And they're like, oh, that's mine, I'll take it. So I would say you should do that. Even if you just have one assistant, she should know what her roles are and you should know what yours are, okay? And then there's monthly tasks that Emily has to do, and I put on the date when she does it, so she knows. You can even put that on a calendar. I have weekly tasks that I know she works every Monday, so every Monday she gets up and I'm like, quickly go through this, get that done. So she has a rhythm to her business, which is very, very helpful. And then she has daily tasks. So basically she just she texts me in the morning like, hey, Kalli, I'm checking in. I've got 10 minutes today. What do you want me to work on? Like, I just say, I just want you to check in and tell me where you're at with the projects that we talked about on Monday. So she just keeps me there. She checks social media pages. She updates and cleans up Trello. And my whole thing is get stuff moving forward. And then member requests to the social groups she does. So you can kind of see that I've gotten really, really nerdy. And this helps so much with like mental clarity at the end of the day. Mikkel has her own weekly tasks that she works on, and it's right there. Here's your daily tasks, Mikkel. One of the things Mikkel does is any type of Zoom call that's recorded, she goes in and takes it and posts it onto our website so that people kind of know where that is, and I never have to worry about it. It's our calls are on the calendar, so she can grab. The other thing I want to talk about really fast is a concept called macros versus micros. I also call these big leaps and baby steps. So this is huge, okay? I'm giving you this for free, and I had to pay like thousands of dollars for coaching, okay? So macros are projects that are going to take over an hour, and you can say less than a month, but we decided today that it's going to take less than a week. Has to take less than a week. So it's going to be over an hour, but less than a week. That's a macro project. That's a hefty project. Every macro has to be broken down into micros. And if a macro is bigger than a week project, it has to be broken down into multiple macros. Does that make sense? So if it's like, I want to rank advance to my next rank, well, that's probably going to take longer than a week, even longer than a month. So that has to be broken down into several macros. So micros, so when you have a macro, like maybe it is, I want to work on the newsletter, or give me a macro, Megan. I don't know that you guys are working on right now.
Oh gosh, what is a good one? Project broadcast.
Project broadcast. Okay, so project broadcast is a macro. It's going to take longer than an hour, right? It's gonna be a beast for a second, right? So that's going to be one macro. And then what you have to do is you have to take project broadcast and you need to break it down into tasks that take no longer than 15 minutes, all the way down to where your assistant knows this project is now done and I can move it on. So let me kind of show you what that could look like. So project broadcast for us is going to take, it's more than one macro. We've actually broken it down into 3. And so you can see like right now, I've broken down this macro into bite-sized chunks. So the first thing is my assistant's going to meet with another assistant and get trained. She's then going to set up just these 2 campaigns. Reminders for our Tuesday and Thursday classes, and an email opt-in from our mailing list to get the text from Project Broadcast. So as soon as she's done, and I'm budgeting with her, I'm like, I think this should only take you like maybe 2 hours max. So she's like, yeah, I think so. I'm like, let me know if it takes more time. She's like, no, I got it. I'll put it in. I even gave her a due date. I want this done by next week, Monday. So you've got a week to finish this macro. She's like, perfect, right? And so she's going in when she checks in and she's just looking like, what are my macros this week? Oh, Callie wants me to do project broadcast first. I'll go ahead and get that done. I'll check it off. I'll get it done. And now I can put it in the done pile. Now I'm ready for my next project. Make sense? So this is
I have a really quick question for you. What would you say to those who, I have several clients who are terrified of Trello and being in a system like this, where they are not the planners, they're not organized, and they're not techie. How would you encourage someone to overcome that fear and maybe jump into something like this?
I would kind of say get over it. I have to force myself to do scary things all the time. It's part of being an amazing business owner. I'm terrified. I don't even know. Project broadcast terrifies me right now. I'm not going to lie. It terrifies me. I'm like, right? But I'm like, it's on the calendar. Emily's going to hold my hand. We're going to do it together and get it done. So if you want to not do anything like this, just know you're going to shoot yourself in the foot and you're going to get frustrated and your assistant's going to get frustrated and you're going to wonder why you're like not hitting things. So I'm just going to say, get over it. I'm sorry, just get over it, because I have to get over stupid stuff all the time, all the time. But the cool thing is you have an assistant that can hold your feet to the fire. And if you give them self permission, like I had a heart to heart conversation with Emily, my assistant this week, and I said, I'm so sorry. Your list, I had like 12 things on there. I'm so sorry. I'm never going to do that to you again. I said, so your responsibility is to make sure that I don't give you too much, because then you become a squirrel. You're like, oh my gosh, I have to get 50 things done. And guess what? Nothing gets done. So I said, please don't let me be a squirrel boss. Let's decide really clearly on the 2 macros that you're going to do this week. And then I want you to get stuff done, and then we'll bring in the next project. Now, Mikkel, you'll notice her list is a little bit heftier, but these projects are actually micro projects. So we went over and we budgeted, and I said, how much time would that take to get the BOGO done? She's like 5 minutes, done, right? So she has a little bit more, but she's like almost done. She's like, I have 1 person left to get this one done. So budget wise, we've already budgeted like this, all these things right here for her to do are going to take like max 2 hours this week.
And Kelly, can I draw attention to that? Because I have so many of my clients who are like, oh my gosh, my assistant spent this many hours doing this project and I didn't know it would take that long. And so I think this is such an incredible way to overcome that issue where you're communicating beforehand, as the task is even delegated. How long do you think this will take you to do is a great question every time that you delegate something. Because if you're in your mind thinking it's only going to take an hour, but your assistant's like, actually, that's going to take me 3 good hours to do that one project, then you can scale back your expectations like, oh, okay, well, let's break it down then. And then you're not concerned or surprised later when it takes longer, or maybe it takes shorter and you realize you can add more to the list like Callie has done. So having that.
Your Monday board calls are like non-negotiable. You have to, because every project, if you're budgeting, then there's no surprises. And I told you before, Megan, like if this takes you longer than 5 hours, call me and let me jump in and see why and let me help you. I've said that many, many times, because one, you got to budget how much you're willing to pay people too, right? And so, or if a project is even worth that money, like some projects aren't worth that money. So you've got to have that conversation. But I would say this is huge. And then you get to celebrate your done pile. You're like, check it out, sisters. Like we've got so much done. And we have like little parties all the time. But you'll notice again, even my husband has tasks and they love moving stuff off, right? And then we do keep our price tracker here too. So that's just something. And then there's things that, like you said, that aren't worth our time. I put it in the revisit pile. We can revisit that later at another time. We can pick it up. There's helpful links, all kinds of stuff. So hopefully that helps, but that's a lifesaver in managing a team productively.
I love that. If we get value from that, that's just amazing. I love to see how she actually, not that I haven't seen it, but I love to see how you do that, Callie.
In a second, I don't think, Megan hasn't seen the whole thing go down, but.
Yeah, it's awesome. So I kind of want to jump into kind of shift gears for a second and get into communication, because this is a question I get a lot from people is how do I talk to my assistant, or for the assistants, how do I communicate what I need so that I can actually be successful in my role? And so before I even get into anything, I want to just say, just ask. I can't even stress that enough. Just talk to each other. I've had so many people say, how do I say this to my assistant? Or as the assistant, how do I ask this of my client? You just say it. And that's like the best advice that I can give you. If you're not saying it, then my conflict management coach, what she used to tell me is conflict is never one-sided. There's two sides to everything. And so if you hold it in and decide never to address it, you are fermenting while the other person doesn't even know that a conflict exists. And so you need to communicate that thing. Kalli, any thoughts on that while we're kind of shifting gears?
Yeah, yes. I think even things that, so I even had to tell my assistant something. I said, here's the thing. I don't want you to ever take what I say personally. I just told him that. Don't ever take what I say personally. I'm a maximizer. Maximizers are always going to take a finished project and tweak it. So that's just what I'm going to do. So even if it's a perfect project, it's in my personality. So if I have to address something, or if I'm like, I don't like that word or whatever, like, please don't ever take it offensively. Just go with me and entertain me. And I think that's helped a ton, right? If I see something, I'm going to tell you. And so if I hurt your feelings, like, tell me, but please just know that that's just going to happen. So preparing ahead of time, I think, is huge. But if you're annoyed and you never talk about it and you're not gracious and kind about it, then you might lose assistance and you might have unnecessary frustration. So
Yeah.
use
And
them.
I have some really sweet empaths or harmonizers that are so afraid to bring those concerns out because they're afraid of that conflict. And this is what I'll say to that: conflict is going to happen. And you just have to, again, like Kalli said, anticipate it and decide now how you're going to approach it. What are you going to do when you disagree or when something doesn't meet your expectations? How are you going to talk about that? And really, really think clearly and even have a conversation. Like Kalli and I think we've even spoken about that several times. Like, what are we going to do when we're stressed? How do we actually communicate with each other? And we would plan for that before the situation even arose. And it was so helpful psychologically for us to get into that mindset that this is what it looks like when I'm stressed. And so I knew when Kalli was stressed how to insert myself into that space.
And not take things personally. Like, just don't take things personally.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Um, okay, so really quickly, I just want to make sure I'm not missing the chat. Okay, so a couple of thoughts really quick as far as communication. We've talked about some healthy things that will set you up for success with your weekly meetings, with your project management tool. And I want to also mention a calendar. You can use Trello in a calendar view as well. But Kalli, how does a calendar, we've kind of talked about that as far as off time, like seeing when your assistants aren't working, but how else is seeing a calendar that you share together helpful?
Yeah, so I have a couple of things that are really, really helpful. Again, different ranks require different levels, I think, of order. But as a presidential diamond, I have Calendly that helps a ton. So I don't talk to anyone really on my team outside of my office hours. I send them a link and say, if you want to schedule an appointment with me, here's my link, and they can look at my calendar. And I've really very distinguished office hours. But I also share my business calendar with my assistants, because so they can see like when I'm available, when I'm not. And we're super nerdy. I use Google Calendar. You can use the Trello calendar if you want, but that's huge, 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 huge. In fact, even today I said, I know you guys, spring break's coming up. Put your, I said this already, put your vacation days on the calendar so I can see it. So using that is a big deal.
Yeah. One of the comments said there is merit in letting a person who is functioning as your assistant use their strengths to be the planner and organizer and work together with them to see the infrastructure. Then the leader can be the director of it all once the structure is implemented. And I do love that. What I
Yeah.
will also add is that don't just say because you're the planner and you're the organizer assistant, I need you to plan and organize and tell me what to do. There is a balance where you're working together, but I do agree that that is so helpful that when you have that planner, that they can come in and say, oh, I see this, let's break it down this way. But you still have to, as the manager, break it down for them too. Because what is really, really hard as an assistant is when it's just like, I want you to run project broadcast. And so, Kalli, what would happen if that's how you delegated that task to your assistants? Would they walk away and be like, all right, I've got it. I know exactly what's expected of me. I know when I should get it done. I know what things I need to go into that project. Would that be hard?
I think the thing is, you can't read my mind in regards to my priorities.
Mhm.
So even if you're just expressing to your virtual assistant your priorities, I think that's a big thing. There were times, Megan, that Megan's skill set was better than mine in many areas. I wanted to put together a course online for Train by Rank, and I gave Megan the vision, and I'm like, I don't know the software, I don't know the best way to do it, but this is the vision of what I'd like to do. Here, let's use the doTERRA guides and break it up. How comfortable do you feel taking that and running with it? And she's like, I love it. It makes me giddy. So after I gave her the priority and the objective and the tools, she went out, she found the platform, she broke down the weeks, like she was able to take it and run with it. But you have to be able to express, this is what I want, these are my priorities, and just ask them, am I being clear? Do you know what to do? Am I giving you enough direction? That communication is huge. That's why the Monday meetings, like, they're non-negotiable. You have to have those.
And I love that question in the end, like after you've gone through the whole meeting, maybe recap and put it on the assistant and say, okay, we talked about a lot. Tell me what you heard and what you're going to take away from the meeting. And Callie would do that a lot with me. Okay, we talked about a lot. What are you going to do after this? Just so that we're clear, we're recapping. So I would regurgitate what I was going to then do. And Callie would be like, that's great, except for make sure you don't forget this part too. I'm like, oh, right. And then we get clarity and then we'd move on. And so that's super, super helpful to make sure that dialogue exists. I'd lost my train of thought. Oh, and I was going to say too, that even though I loved making courses, like that was something that made me so excited, that may not be something that your VA gets super excited about. So ask them, say, I would love to enter this new space. Is this something you want to do and would be excited about? And then be okay while they're learning. Like I didn't just walk in the door and start making courses. We did some investigation. We started researching different platforms. It took some time, but I wanted to do it, and Callie was ready for me to learn how to do it, and so we just figured it out.
Always ask, like, do you want to do this? Like, is this something fun? Because if it's not fun for them and they don't love it, then you're not going to get the best product, right? And so that's when we started hiring someone else. Like someone else came on aboard and helped me do a lot of the events, and was there like managing food and stuff like that. Because Megan's like, oh, that's hard for me. I've got kids at home and stuff. So find the person that loves to do it. And not that every job you did, you loved, Megan. I mean,
Yeah, there were totally things I did that like didn't like light my fire, but I knew that that was part of my role in supporting you. Yeah, but I could still spend a lot of my other time doing other things that I loved. I knew there was still a balance of I wasn't always doing things that sucked my energy dry. And you were always asking, are you having fun? That was like a question that was always on the weekly meetings. Are you having fun? Are you enjoying this? And I really appreciated that. Okay, so we talked about weekly meetings a little bit. And I want to say too, a task is never fully delegated if there's not a deadline attached to it. And so if you just say, I want to do project broadcast, and we'll keep going back to that one because that's the example, but if you had never put a deadline on it, it would end up taking weeks and months before it was actually seen to completion. So I want to make sure that all of you are attaching deadlines to things instead of just saying, I would love to have this done. And ask your assistant, when can you do this? And assistants, if you don't get a deadline, ask for one. When would you like to see this by? And that just really creates that awesome, healthy communication. Okay, we talked about Trello, talked about calendar. I do want to mention budgeting hours. I know several of you have said I cannot pay an assistant more than X amount of hours, and that's totally fine and healthy. But just know that you need to be the one to decide how that time is spent. And so if you can only spend 5 hours a week and you want 30 things done, you're going to walk away disappointed because you're not communicating clearly. It might take months to get all the things you want done if you only have 5 hours a week to do them. And that's fine. Work within your budget, but you need to get really nerdy about prioritizing what is coming next. Thoughts on that, Callie?
no, yeah, be realistic, right? And
Yeah.
that's the biggest thing is and I would often tell Megan, like, I can pay you X amount this week. If when you start to approach the 8 hour line or whatever, like text me and either I'll jump in or get it done with you or whatever. So yeah, really important.
Yeah. And I will say that I've had a lot of assistants say my client has, 15 hours of work for me to do, but only is adamant I'm only working 5. So if that's you as an assistant, then you need to be very clear in saying, this is awesome. I'm excited about all the things that we're doing and where you want to go. This week, to stay within your 5 hours, I can only do X, Y, and Z. And then next week, I can do A, B, and C. And so you as the assistant need to be very, very clear on that expectation and what you're capable of, instead of just having a bunch of things that you've been assigned fall through the cracks. Communicate that I will not be able to do these things, so I don't go over hours with you. Make sure you're having that conversation together. Um, I want to also mention, Callie, the quarterly planning meetings we didn't stick to it every quarter, but we would try to at least a couple times a year to meet together for a longer period of time than the weekly meetings. What I would love for you to talk about the value that you had and the clarity that we had in that process.
Well, I think you're a team, right? You're working as a team. And whenever you can get the team more connected, it helps so much. And so we would do some day events like quarterly. We would meet at the like public library get on a Saturday, and we would just really hash out like what we were going to work on the next 90 days. And then not that you have to, but I love the connection. I love my girls. Like I love them so much. They were an integral part of everything that I did, including things outside of doTERRA, um, with other projects, like I do coaching and stuff out of them. So they were a part of the vision of how I wanted to show up in the world and how I wanted to impact the world. Right. So I would rent, not that you have to, but I would rent a hotel in Park City, like a suite, for 2 or 3 days sometimes. And I would fly them out, and we would have papers and pens and poster boards and the whole thing, and just basically map out the vision and the strategies and the projects for the entire year. And that was a really fun way to get to know them better and to kind of show my appreciation for them. But I don't know, what did you think about?
Oh, I loved them. They were so fun. It was like a girls' weekend. And I will say, for those of you that are like, oh, I can't find my assistant out, we're on the other sides of the country. You can still do something similar virtually, where you're meeting quarterly for like 4 hours or something for a longer period of time, and really hashing out what your vision is for the next 3 months. What are we trying to achieve? What are our main goals? What are our main projects? And then you're breaking them down together. And I love that as an assistant. I walked away with so much clarity, and like the fire was underneath me, where I wanted to immediately jump in and get started and all the things. So I was excited. I was excited to feel like I wasn't just being delegated to, but that I was brought into that discussion of we were in this together. And I valued that so much as an
Well,
assistant.
and at the end of the day, when you're running a business, it's about service. Who
Yeah.
are you serving? How are you serving? And your assistants are a huge part of being able to serve a much larger audience than you alone, right? And so I hired assistants basically because their passions were the same too. Like Megan wanted to serve and uplift and elevate people just as much as I did. And so when she saw the results of what we were creating, like I know it lit her up too, because she's like, I had a part in that, right? And so that was really fun.
Yeah. And celebrate wins. Um, and maybe that's a good time to get into this praise and celebrating wins together. I think is so valuable. One of the things I loved is that we did celebrate wins together, and that I often heard from Callie what she loved about me, or what she was grateful for. And I valued that so much, because as think of any job that you've ever had, the jobs that you love the most are when you feel valued and appreciated. But if you're always hearing what you're not doing well, then your energy is stifled, and your heart isn't in it. But when you hear what's going well, you live up to that expectation. It's almost like reverse psychology, where you hear what you're doing well, so you try to do it better, try to keep meeting that expectation. In fact, I've had several people send in some really cute quotes where some of you assistants, I won't say who they are, about how awesome they love working with all of you. And they said, showing appreciation and gratefulness helps me to strive to be better and do better. I've been shown this by words, random small surprises, and even occasional raises. And so I think that that's so, so helpful. And I love that about you, Callie, that we did that together. Um, yeah, okay, that's all I'll say on that. Kind of a reverse of this, I would love to talk a little bit about how to have a conversation if when things aren't going happy and giddy, and that you have to say something that you're not meeting expectations, whether the assistant's not meeting expectation or the client. And so how to have that conversation is so, so helpful and important. And so before I even jump in, Callie, do you have any thoughts on it before I dive in?
No, I'm curious to know how I had them. What do you remember?
And again, it just goes back to that thing that you just say it. Like that, I've had so many people that they tell me, how do I tell my assistant that the graphics they put out they had grammar errors on them. How do I tell my assistant that I don't like the newsletter she created? How do I tell my assistant that I wish that she would communicate with me in this way? And then for the assistants, how do I tell my client that I need us to stick to weekly meetings or else I can't support them? Or I've also heard the assistant say, how do I get my client to commit to a project management tool because I feel like I'm in chaos and don't know how to support them? And so all of this is just to say, you just say it. You say it right then and you don't wait. So we all know passive aggressive versus assertive, but we really, really, really need to say those things in the moment. Hey, and Kelly, you were so good at this. Like, hey, Megan, I just noticed the link you sent out isn't correct. Can you go fix that? How many times has that happened? Or, hey, Megan, I noticed that there was a grammar error. Can you go fix that before you send it out? Instead of like waiting 3 weeks and then giving me a list of, okay, Megan, we've had some problems and I want to address them. And then instead of like stacking on this list of this happened, and this happened, then suddenly I feel small and small and small. You never did that to me. You would address it in the moment so that I could immediately resolve it and resolve that concern. And I think this is one of the key things that you all can do together. Even the assistants, if you need something from your client, don't like hold it in and wait a month later and say, here are all the things that I wish that you would be doing so that I can support you effectively.
Megan was my boss, was so bossy all the time. And I told her that, like, and she would almost like in a scolding way, like, Kelly, you said that you were going to have this done and you're still not done. Like, can you get on that? Right. But I had given her that permission, like, please help me to hold my feet to my Trello board. And so, you know, she was really good. And I let her, and like, please do that. Like, if you see me put something out that's retarded, it doesn't look good, like get on it. And so I think that at the end of the day, like, you guys want to win together. So rather than being like, oh, I don't want to tell her, be like, no, I want to help her win. I want to help her win every time, and vice versa. Be on that winning team, I think, is a big thing.
Yeah. And I think sometimes that is new when you're first working with an assistant, sometimes it's like, oh, there was a grammar error and I didn't like the newsletter and I didn't like this. And so you start stacking things on. But when you start to realize that, give each other grace, and if you will talk about those things as they happen, you'll see that you start to overperform together and that those things are now brought to attention, like, oh, grammar is really, really important. I need to make sure anytime that Callie mentioned a grammatical error, the next time I was writing anything, I would give it even a third scoop over. I would make sure I was being extra cautious looking over it because it was brought to my attention and I wanted to perform well and I didn't want to let her down and I wanted to correct well.
I was going to say too, we did a lot of Pinterest boards too, because again, assistants can't read your mind. So if you have like an idea or a branding page or something, like create a Pinterest board. And I would say, hey, Megan, can we use this kind of branding for this? Or can you look at this newsletter or this ebook for this? And I think that was helpful too. So she can't read my mind, right? So
I'm so glad you said that, because I think sometimes even in the beginning when I was pulling in images, you're like, that doesn't really feel like me. I don't really feel like this resonates with me. This isn't my style. I'm like, gosh, what is? I don't really know. I like it. So why don't you like it? And so it was really helpful when we did the Pinterest boards because I could see, oh, this is what she likes. These are colors that she's drawn to. This is the type of image that she resonates with. So then I was able to start adapting and bringing things in, and Callie could say, oh yeah, I like that. I like that. So it's really, really helpful. And to know that anytime you're doing something creative, it takes time to have that collaborative back and forth. And if you aren't willing to invest in that collaborative back and forth, whatever you're creating is not going to represent you. It's so healthy and natural to break it down together and say, oh, but what about this? Maybe this instead, or I like this one better. Break it down together. Okay. Yeah. Thank you, Heather, for that. That's very, very good. Okay, so really, really quick, kind of talked about some of those things. I just want to make sure I'm not forgetting anything. Okay. Some people have been asking in the comments about billable time, like what do we actually bill for? And some of the things that I would bill for are the weekly calls where we're connecting each week. I would anything that was a deliverable, anything that I was creating and then delivering, like a newsletter or something that was actionable. Even like if I was spending a long time sending text messages back and forth where we were brainstorming on things, even though it was like 3 minutes at a time or 3 minutes here, it was time that I was stepping away from my family really quick. And so I would clock in for that time. just so that my, because eventually it could be an hour a day of texting or voxering or sending audio messages back and forth where we're brainstorming and collaborating. And so I wanted to honor that time. What I did not clock in though for was like when Callie sometimes would pay for me to attend convention, and that was a gift for me to attend convention. Or we went to California and attended a retreat together for Grace Lever, and she paid for my hotel and the car for the gas and the food. And so I went and I took notes and enjoyed the weekend away, but I didn't bill for that time. And same with going through the coffee cure. I didn't bill for the time to go through that course because she paid for it and asked me if I wanted to go through it. She didn't say, I want you to go through this course. And then I felt obligated to go into it. She said, would you like to go through it? And then I went through it and I didn't bill for it. And so you have to talk to each other. If you don't know what's billable time, just talk to each other. Any thoughts on that, Kelly?
Talked about that before. Like I'd say,
Mhm.
this, I'm going on this retreat. It would be helpful for you to know this, don't have to. So, and then there were other times when I did a retreat and I did pay you because you were working for me the whole time. So I think just having those conversations before you do something like that is huge.
Yeah, like we would often, yeah, do like if we did a cabin retreat and I was there organizing the agenda and getting the food ready and making sure that everybody was taken care of. I'm working during that time. That's different than like continued education or personal development where I'm going to a retreat or going to a convention. And so just talk to each other. If ever you're in doubt, just ask the question. I can't say that, stress that enough. If ever you're in doubt with one another, just talk about it, just ask. And 99% of all communication issues would be solved if you just talked with each other and said, what's billable hours to you? Okay, because I could have had this impression. How can we meet in the middle? Just talk. Okay, I think that's mostly, so I really want to quickly touch on just a couple of last things. I'm getting a lot of quotes or messages in the chat about healthy boundaries, both for the assistant and the client. How do you create that boundary where you are not on call all the time as the assistant? And we kind of touched on that just a little bit. Here are some tips. Please turn your phone off when you're not working. If and I would sometimes do that if I was at the park and I wanted to be fully present with my kids. And I knew Callie would even text me, hey, I'm turning off my phone all day today. So if you need to reach me, like this is your last chance. And she would do that to me often. And I would do that to her too. Like, I'm totally out this weekend. I'm not going to be available. And just have that dialogue back and forth. And if you can't work on something right away, at least acknowledge that you received the message. Don't let a text message sit for days and days and days without being responded to. I always would at least say, hey, I got your message. Can't act on it now, but I can at this time. At least acknowledge receipt of the message, but don't feel like you have to be present constantly, that make time for your family. Finally, I want to talk about relinquishing control for a second. A lot of you have been asking, what can I even delegate? And so Callie, I'd like to ask you, what can these doTERRA leaders or any business owner delegate?
Well, you have to have enough self-awareness to know what are things that only you can do to make your business move forward. What are the things that only you can do, right? What are your gifts that you can bring that no one else can really replace? And then everything else, delegate. And this is something that, again, Elise Chenevy told me. I have to laugh because Elise Chenevy, who's triple presidential diamond, told me I was a horrible writer. So I never wrote a paper in college. I like hired someone to write my papers. I would tell them like the whole concept. I would give them the outline, and then this guy would type it. Like she's like, she is the master delegator. Elise is, and that's why she cruises and gets so much done because she told me that she's like, you need to hire a diamond because you need to basically hit your note, Callie, over and over and over and over again, and create as much space to do that. And so for me, Megan couldn't replace me recruiting my personal business clients. Like I couldn't have Megan do that. Even mentoring, like strategic thinking and stuff when it comes to running doTERRA, Megan hadn't hit the ranks that I had hit yet. So I'm not going to like put that on her, right? And so for me in my business, I spend the bulk of my time doing that even now. That's the bulk of my time, and creating content for my teams, whether it be a calendar for the year or strategizing things. There's things that I can do. Everything else, especially think to yourself, can a 12-year-old do this? Can a 16-year-old do this? Anything that you can say yes to, like delegate it. Or a recent college grad, if she can do it, then let her do it. I do find people will just hold on really tight. Well, no one can write like me, or no one can answer Facebook messages like me. And to me, I'm like, that's fine. You can do that, but you're going to be doing that rather than doing other big things. So I have loved delegating. It's my favorite because I love spending time as the visionary and the creative. And so the more I can delegate, the more I can really spend time in my zone of genius. So if you haven't read The Big Leap yet, go read that. I mean, there's lots of great books, but again, you to be a super, super savvy business person and to be authentically building a business that you can walk away from and earn residual income eventually. Like, I don't want to be probably doing intro classes when I'm like 60, to be honest. Like, I don't know if that's me. Some people might, I mean, depending on when you start your doTERRA business. But if I can, again, write down everything I do, get all my protocols typed out, and then go, okay, what can I pass on? What can I pass on? And that's huge. Huge.
Absolutely. I think your ability to grow as a business owner is hinged on your ability to delegate. And so what I often see with my clients that come in is, especially when they're diamond or above, they're like, I'm ready to either quit my business or hire help. I can't tell you how many times I've heard that because they've now reached a point when their business is controlling them and they're not controlling their business. And because they don't have that help and that system in place. And so it's so crucial that you get ready to delegate. And when we attended this Grace Lever not concert retreat a few years ago, it was she actually said that 90% of your business can be delegated. The only thing that you should be doing is sales. And I thought that was kind of intense. Like everything else can be delegated. So you may want to just consider doing an exercise where every day when you step into your office or you start working, whether it's on your phone, on your computer, elsewhere, write it down, say, this is what I did for my business today. And then consider, is this something that only I can do or that I have to delegate or that I can delegate? Because there are people that can take that on. And that exercise might be pretty revealing for you. As far as other things to delegate, I have a wish list that's on my website that I can send you in the show notes of a whole bunch of other things that your assistant can do for you. But sometimes people, when they look at this wish list, they either get overwhelmed, like, oh, I'm not doing any of these things. I must be a terrible business owner. Please don't think that. I can't tell you how many times I meet with these diamonds and above who are who would look at the wish list and say, I'm not doing any of these. And they all are in chaos just as much as everybody else. And so make sure that it doesn't overwhelm you. You're just choosing, again, just a few things at a time that you're focusing on for now. And with that wish list, talk with your assistant and say, here's what I'd like to do. Where do you want to play? What do we need to do to get there? And just have that dialogue going forth. We can include in the show notes a whole bunch of other things like that you can actually delegate, but that will give you a good start. Now, the assistants, I hear a lot from you that there's times when you wish you could have more tasks or not being utilized to the best of your abilities, then send this wish list to your person and say, here's all that I can do for you. What would you find value in this week? And that's a really great way to, because sometimes when they're so busy, did you ever feel this way where you felt like, sometimes it's like, I don't even know what I need help with today. I'm here at our weekly meeting. I don't even know what I need help with today. And you still showed up to that weekly meeting. You're like, what are you all working on? Because I don't even know. My brain is too fried to think about what I can delegate. And so, but once we started talking, what happened?
Well, yeah, they'd start giving me ideas. And then, of course, we have our in queue list here. And so it's like, oh, you guys all finished your boards. Let's bring in some other projects. So that helps too, is just get stuff on the board. Maybe you take that whole list and you put that in your projects down the dump section. You just put that all there. And then over time, you pull one thing over at a time. That could be huge. I
Yeah.
kind of that list.
Yeah. Awesome. We still have, so many things I'm sure that we can talk about. And I know that there have been several questions, so we'll try to answer some of them in the email afterwards, but we're already at an hour and a half, so I wanted to kind of cut us off. But thank you so much, Kalli. This was such a treasure to have you join us and to share your wisdom and to fill of your energy. It's always fun to have you here. So thank you so much, Kalli.
Well, love you very much. You guys are so spoiled. I hope you know that. And I cried. I was like, no, Megan, no, don't leave me. But I'm so glad that you guys get to experience the brilliance of Megan Lloyd. So you're so lucky. And I hope that you know how much she is such a blessing.
Thank you. Have a good night, everybody. We'll send the recording out to everybody who afterwards, probably tomorrow or Wednesday. So thank you so much, everybody. Have a great night.